The morning sun streamed through the wide windows of the daily grind, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors of Seattle's busiest downtown coffee shop. The usual buzz of conversation and the hiss of espresso machines filled the air as Marcus Johnson waited patiently in line, responding to emails on his phone. At 42, with his tailored charcoal suit and quiet confidence, Marcus carried himself with the ease of someone who had earned his success through years of dedication. "Grande caramel macchiato for Karen," called out the barista, her voice barely carrying over the morning rush. A woman in her 50s, wearing designer yoga pants and a permanent scowl, pushed past Marcus, jostling his arm. His phone clattered to the floor, the screen spidering with cracks. The woman, Karen Winchester, according to her gold-plated name necklace, didn't even pause. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his deep voice calm but firm. "I believe you owe me an apology." Karen turned, her eyes narrowing as she took in Marcus's appearance. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as other customers began to notice the exchange. A barista paused mid-pour, and a student removed her earbuds. "I don't owe you anything," Karen spat, her voice rising. "Why don't you watch where you're standing? People like you are always in the way." The phrase "people like you" hung in the air like smoke, its meaning unmistakable. Phones emerged from pockets as onlookers sensed the brewing confrontation. Marcus straightened his tie, a gift from his daughter, and took a deep breath. He'd faced moments like this before, but something told him this one would be different. The regulars at the daily grind knew Marcus Johnson well. They'd watched his tech company, Inclusive Tech Solutions, grow from a startup in his garage to a Fortune 500 company employing over 3,000 people. What impressed them most wasn't his success, but how he'd maintained his humanity along the way. Each morning, he'd greet the homeless man outside with a breakfast sandwich and conversation. Every Christmas, he anonymously paid off layaway items at the department store next door. Today, though, Marcus wasn't thinking about his achievements or his recently announced $1 million scholarship program for underprivileged youth. He was thinking about his grandmother's words: "When they go low, baby, you go high. But make sure you lift others up with you." Behind the counter, Jasmine Rodriguez, the lead barista, watched the scene unfold with growing concern. She'd worked here through college, and Marcus had noticed her struggling to balance work and studies. Now she was finishing her computer science degree, thanks to an internship at his company. She gripped the espresso machine tightly, remembering how he'd told her, "Talent is equally distributed, opportunity isn't." Karen Winchester's perfectly manicured hands shook slightly as she clutched her designer handbag. The local news had recently featured her family's real estate company facing bankruptcy after her husband's arrest for fraud. Her social circle had quietly distanced themselves, and her daughter had postponed her wedding. The familiar sense of control slipping away fueled her anger. Among the growing crowd, an elderly black man named William Parker leaned on his cane, his weathered face a map of civil rights-era battles. He'd marched with Dr. King and recognized the weight of this moment. Beside him, a young white mother named Sarah held her mixed-race daughter closer, whispering something in her ear. Tom Chen, the coffee shop owner, emerged from his office. He'd immigrated 30 years ago with nothing but determination and his grandmother's recipes. The pastry display featured his fusion of Asian and American desserts, a symbol of cultures enriching each other. His fingers drummed anxiously on the counter as he watched two worlds collide in his carefully cultivated space of community. A teenager in the corner, Alex Rivera, hit record on their phone. As a non-binary person of color, they'd faced their own battles with prejudice. Their social media activism channel had gained followers for highlighting both injustice and moments of transformation. Something told them this would be one of those moments. Marcus adjusted his cufflinks, a Father's Day gift from his kids, and thought about his board meeting later. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd be presenting a diversity initiative to help other companies create more inclusive workplaces. His phone lay forgotten on the floor, screen cracked like the facade of civility in the coffee shop. Karen's voice had that slight tremor, the one that appears when someone's worldview starts to crack. Her carefully constructed reality was already fragile, and now she faced a successful black man who refused to play the role she'd assigned him. Something had to give. You people always think you're entitled to special treatment. Karen's voice rose sharply, drawing more eyes to the unfolding scene. Just because you wear an expensive suit doesn't mean you belong here. Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced 20 years ago when a banker had laughed him out of the office, refusing to even look at his business plan. He remembered sitting in his cramped apartment that night, his infant daughter asleep on his chest, as he refined his pitch for the 100th time. "Ma," and Marcus replied, his voice steady, "I simply ask for an apology for breaking my phone." He gestured to the cracked device, still lying on the floor. "Oh, now you're accusing me of damaging your property." Karen's laugh was brittle. "I bet you're just looking for a handout, trying to scam an innocent woman." The words transported Marcus to his son's private school 5 years ago, where a teacher had accused the straightest student of cheating, unable to believe a black child could excel naturally at advanced mathematics. His son had quit the robotics team after that. Jasmine stepped forward from behind the counter, her hands shaking with anger, but Tom gently touched her arm. They'd both witnessed Marcus handle similar situations before, like when he'd been mistaken for a delivery man in his own office building, or when security had followed him around his company's charity gala. If you'd just watched the security footage, a young voice piped up. Alex, the teenager with the phone, pointed to the cameras mounted in the corners. Karen whirled around, her designer bag swinging wildly. "Mind your own business. This generation thinks they can lecture their elders about everything. No respect." Just like him, she jabbed a finger toward Marcus. The crowd had grown larger, pressing against the windows from outside. William Parker, the elderly civil rights veteran, gripped his cane tighter, memories of fire hoses and police dogs flooding back. Sarah, the young mother, covered her daughter's ears, but didn't leave her child needed to see how to stand against hatred. Marcus thought of his grandmother again. She'd been the first black teacher at her school, enduring daily threats with unwavering dignity. "Your silence won't protect you," she told him, "but your words can protect others." "I don't have to justify my presence here," Marcus said quietly, but his voice carried through the now silent coffee shop. "Just like I didn't have to justify my presence in the boardroom, or the country club, or my own neighborhood." Karen's face flushed red. "Oh, playing the race card now? Classic. You know what? I've worked hard for everything I have. Nobody gave me handouts. Nobody." "Like the handout your husband gave himself from his client's account," someone in the crowd muttered. Karen's face went pale. Marcus raised his hand for silence, remembering another lesson from his grandmother: hurt people, hurt people, hurt people, baby. But healed people heal people. Tom Chen moved closer to the center of the shop, ready to intervene if needed. He'd seen enough conflicts escalate in his 30 years as a business owner, but something in Marcus's demeanor told him to wait. The tension in the room was a living thing now, heavy and electric. Phones recorded from every angle, but no one dared post, yet everyone sensed this moment wasn't over. The morning sun continued its arc through the windows, creating a spotlight effect on the two figures at the center of the drama. Karen's hands trembled more violently now, her designer purse clutched like a shield. Every exit seemed blocked by the crowd of onlookers. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling, and she was running out of familiar scripts. "You don't know anything about me," she spat, desperation creeping into her voice. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything, to have people judge you without knowing your story." Marcus allowed the irony of her words to hang in the air for a moment. Outside, traffic continued its morning rush, oblivious to the drama unfolding within. The espresso machine hissed in the background, an odd counterpoint to the tension. And then Karen played her final card, the words that would change everything. Her voice cracked as she delivered the line that would soon echo across social media: "Why don't you just go back to Africa where you belong?" The words hung in the air like poison. Even the espresso machine seemed to hold its breath. William Parker's cane clattered to the floor, the sound sharp as a gunshot in the sudden silence. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, but inside the daily grind, time stood still. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, seeing his grandmother's face. She'd been born in 1930, picked cotton as a child, and lived to see her grandson become a CEO. He opened his eyes, surveying the crowd of frozen faces, some horrified, others curious, all waiting. "Go back to Africa," Marcus repeated softly, his voice carrying in the silence. "Let's talk about that for a moment, Ms. Winchester." He stepped forward, picking up his cracked phone, deliberately taking his time. "My ancestors didn't choose to leave Africa," he began, his deep voice taking on the cadence of a preacher's son. They were stolen, shipped across oceans in conditions so horrific that historians estimate 2 million died during the journey alone. But here's what's fascinating. He paused, noting how Karen's defensive posture had shifted to something less certain. The teenager, Alex, had stopped recording and was simply listening, tears streaming down their face. Those who survived built this country. Their unpaid labor created the wealth that funded America's early growth. The White House, the Capitol black hands laid those stones. The streets of Charleston, the ports of New Orleans. The railroads that connected this nation, black blood and sweat made them possible. William Parker nodded slowly, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Sarah's daughter peeked out from behind her mother's legs, absorbing every word. My great-great-grandfather fought for the Union in the Civil War. My grandfather served in World War II. Even though he had to sit at the back of the bus when he returned home in his uniform. My father marched with Dr. King and was beaten on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And my grandmother, she taught in segregated schools, then integrated schools, then became a principal. Marcus's voice grew softer, but somehow more powerful. So when you tell me to go back to Africa, Ms. Winchester, I have to ask, what part of this American story do you think doesn't belong? The part where we bled for this country, fought for this country, built this country, believed in this country even when it didn't believe in us. Tom Chen had tears in his eyes now, remembering his own immigrant story, different yet connected to this moment. Jasmine stood straighter behind the counter, her chin lifted with pride. But here's what I find truly remarkable, Marcus continued, taking another step toward Karen. Despite everything, the slavery, the Jim Crow laws, the lynchings, the redlining, the daily indignities big and small, we stayed. We stayed and kept believing in the promise of America. We stayed and kept making America better, not just for ourselves but for everyone, including you, Ms. Winchester. The morning sun had shifted now, casting long shadows across the coffee shop floor. In those shadows, histories intertwined, the ghosts of slave ships and freedom marches, of burning crosses and burning hope, of broken chains and unbroken spirits. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. This is my grandmother, Ruby Johnson. She passed last year at 92. The last thing she told me was, baby, hate is just love that got lost on its way home. He held up the photo so Karen could see the dignified black woman in a teacher's dress, standing proudly in front of a segregated school. She taught white children after integration. Some of their parents had spat on her during the protests, but she taught those kids with the same love she gave everyone else. They're not their parents' mistakes, she'd say. Karen's mascara had begun to run, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. Her hands had stopped shaking, now hanging limply at her sides. Did you know? Marcus continued, his voice gentle now, that the first successful open-heart surgery was performed by a black doctor, Daniel Hale Williams. That the traffic light was invented by Garrett Morgan, a black man. That Dr. Charles Drew's work on blood plasma saved countless lives during World War II. Even though segregation meant he couldn't donate blood to the very system he created. The teenage activist Alex had started taking notes. William Parker nodded at each name, a living bridge to that history. Sarah's daughter whispered, "Mummy, I want to be an inventor too." The super soaker? A black man named Lonnie Johnson. The modern home security system? Marie Van Britten Brown, a black woman. The first computer gaming console? Gerald Lawson, a black engineer. Every time someone plays video games, they're touching black innovation. Marcus gestured around the coffee shop. The irony is, Ms. Winchester, some of the very things you use daily were created by the people you think should go back, but here's what my grandmother taught me: these inventors didn't create for just black America. They created for everyone, because that's what America is supposed to be, everyone contributing to make life better for all. Better for all. Karen's designer bag slipped from her grasp, landing with a soft thud. Tears were flowing freely now, her body shaking with silent sobs. "I see you're hurting," Marcus said softly. "I read about your husband's arrest, the company's bankruptcy. It must feel like your whole world is collapsing. When that happens, it's tempting to find someone to blame, someone to hate. But hate won't rebuild your life. It won't help your daughter plan her wedding. It won't restore what you've lost. Jasmine quietly placed a box of tissues on a nearby table. Tom Chen stood nearby, his own immigrant story of loss and rebuilding reflecting in his eyes. My company has a program, Marcus continued, helping people rebuild their careers after setbacks. We believe in second chances, because that's another thing my grandmother taught me: everyone deserves the opportunity to begin again. He reached down and picked up Karen's fallen bag, offering it to her with the same dignity his grandmother had shown those who'd once hated her. So no, Ms. Winchester, I won't go back to Africa. But I will go forward, and if you're willing, you can come too. Because the only way forward is together. The silence in the coffee shop had transformed from tense to reverent. Karen reached for her bag with trembling hands, her eyes meeting Marcus's for the first time, really seeing him, perhaps for the first time. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The words came out between sobs, raw and real, stripped of pretense. Karen's tears fell freely now, years of built-up prejudice washing away with them. I didn't. She struggled to find words, but Marcus simply nodded, understanding the language of transformation. Tom Chen emerged from behind the counter, carrying 2 steaming cups of tea. In my culture, he said, placing them before Marcus and Karen, sharing tea means becoming family. His gesture broke the tension, and the crowd began to shift, no longer spectators but participants in this moment of healing. William Parker approached, retrieving his cane. I marched with Dr. King, he said softly to Karen. He spoke about a dream where our children would see each other's hearts, not their color. Maybe it starts with us seeing each other, truly seeing each other, right here in this coffee shop. Jasmine started collecting people's names and contact information as they spontaneously organized a community discussion group. First meeting next Sunday, she suggested, and heads nodded in agreement. Alex, still filming, had already created a hashtag that was beginning to trend daily Grindunity. Sarah's daughter broke free from her mother's grasp and ran to Karen, offering her a slightly squished muffin from her own breakfast. When I'm sad, sugar helps, she said with childhood wisdom. Karen accepted it with trembling hands and a watery smile. Marcus took out a business card and wrote something on the back. This is my personal number, he told Karen. When you're ready to talk about that career rehabilitation program, call me. He paused, then added with a gentle smile, my grandmother would have loved to see this moment. The morning sun had risen fully now, its light touching everyone equally in the transformed space. What had begun as a moment of hatred had become something else entirely: a small seed of hope, planted in the fertile soil of understanding, watched over by the spirit of Ruby Johnson and all those who had dreamed of such moments. 1 month later. The daily grind buzzed with a different kind of energy. The Unity Grounds program, co-founded by Marcus and Karen, had transformed the coffee shop into a weekly hub for community dialogue. Karen, now employed at Inclusive Tech Solutions Community Outreach Division, sat beside Marcus as they welcomed another packed house. My anger came from fear and ignorance Karen shared with the group. But education replaced that fear with understanding. She glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Now I know that diversity isn't just a buzzword, it's the story of America itself. William Parker attended every meeting, bringing historical context to their discussions. Sarah's daughter had started a school project about Black inventors, inspiring her entire class to explore hidden history. Tom Chen's coffee shop had become a model for other businesses seeking to build community bridges. The video of that transformative morning had reached millions, spawning countless conversations about reconciliation and understanding. But more importantly, it had sparked real change in one community, proving that education and empathy could overcome hatred. If this story moved you, share your own Unity moment in the comments below. Remember, change starts with one conversation, one person, one moment of choosing understanding over anger. Like and subscribe for more stories of transformation, and join us in building a world where we all belong. Daily Grindunity continues to trend. 1.